Hey there, fellow truth seekers, and welcome back to The Unseen Wisdom. If you're digging these deep dives, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Today, we're tackling the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo and examining Rwanda's role, especially in light of South Africa's recent military involvement.
And you know what's really fascinating is our main source for this deep dive, an exclusive interview with Lieutenant General Kayumba Nyamwasa, no stranger to the intricacies of this situation.
Absolutely. For those who need a refresher, General Nyamwasa is the former Rwandan Army Chief of Staff, Chief of Intelligence, and even served as their ambassador to India. He's currently living in South Africa after a falling out with the Rwandan government, so he's got a unique perspective, to say the least.
Yeah. His insights are particularly relevant now with South African troops, the SANDF, operating in the DRC. General Nyamwasa challenges the common assumptions about the conflict right from the start. For example, he highlights that the Rwandan refugee crisis isn't just a recent phenomenon, it stretches back to 1959. In fact, he himself was born outside Rwanda due to this displacement.
Yeah, it's a powerful point, especially when you consider his argument. The focus on Tutsi refugees in the DRC often overshadows the millions of refugees from other tribes, displaced over the past 30 years. Are we perhaps missing a bigger picture by focusing on a single narrative?
It's a question worth pondering, and it gets even more intricate when we look at Rwanda's involvement in the DRC. While General Nyamwasa acknowledges Rwanda's concerns about the FDLR, that's the rebel group posing a threat to their security from within the DRC, he points to a pattern of Rwandan military involvement that goes beyond just addressing this threat.
Right. He specifically mentions past operations like Umoja Wetu and Kimia II.
Yeah.
That were carried out with the permission of previous Congolese governments. So it seems like there's a much deeper and more complex relationship between these two countries than simply dealing with the FDLR.
Exactly. And to make it even more complex, General Nyamwasa argues that the current M23 rebellion, while often portrayed as stemming from ethnic tensions and historical grievances, is actually quite different from its previous iterations. He suggests it emerged when Rwanda felt isolated after Uganda and Burundi were invited to deploy troops in the DRC, while Rwanda was excluded.
So it sounds like he's suggesting that the M23 could be a way for Rwanda to assert its strategic interests in the region. Is this a case of, if you don't let us play nicely, we'll play our own game?
That's one interpretation. But perhaps the most explosive claim General Nyamwasa makes is that Rwanda has been taking Congolese resources for a long time. He explains this by saying that while the Rwandan military secures areas, civilian companies under the control of the ruling Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF, carry out the actual mining and selling of minerals.
Whoa, that's a bold statement. It shines a light on potential economic motivations behind Rwanda's involvement in the DRC, something we don't often hear in mainstream reporting.
It certainly adds another layer of complexity to this conflict. And it gets even more complicated when General Nyamwasa starts talking about international impunity and Rwandan influence. He claims that Rwanda enjoys a degree of impunity for its actions in the DRC because of its strategic partnerships with countries like France, Britain, and the United States.
He's essentially arguing that Rwanda leverages these relationships to secure its interests, potentially raising questions about whether these international actors are turning a blind eye to what's happening because of their own strategic interests.
It's a thought-provoking claim, for sure. And then, of course, we have South Africa's entry into the picture. General Nyamwasa wasn't exactly thrilled with the Rwandan government's reaction to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa referring to the RDF, the Rwandan Defense Force, as a militia group.
Right. He seems concerned that South Africa might be wading into a situation more complex than they anticipated, expecting to encounter rebels, not a sovereign nation's military.
And that brings us to the heart of the issue. Is this intervention by the SANDF shedding light on information that might have otherwise remained hidden? Was this the truth we were waiting for?
It's definitely a question worth asking. If South Africa hadn't stepped in, would General Nyamwasa's perspective, with all its potential implications, have ever reached a wider audience?
It's impossible to say for certain, but it's definitely something to consider. What we do know is that South Africa is facing criticism from various quarters for their involvement.
And that begs the question, where do we go from here? We've got South Africa in the hot seat, accusations of resource exploitation, and a complex web of international relations at play.
General Nyamwasa's insights have certainly added fuel to the fire, challenging us to reassess what we think we know about this conflict.
Yeah, it's a sticky situation, no doubt. And while there's much to unpack about the geopolitical maneuvering, we can't forget that this conflict ultimately impacts real people, their lives, their safety, their very livelihoods.
That's what makes General Nyamwasa's perspective so compelling. He's not just analyzing strategies on a map. He's speaking from first-hand experience about the human cost of this conflict. Remember, he was a key figure in the Rwandan government for years. He understands the inner workings of power from the inside.
And the potential for that power to be abused.
Yeah.
He's particularly critical of the silencing of dissenting voices within Rwanda.
Yeah, he even drew a stark contrast with the situation here in South Africa. He pointed out that Rwandan officials can openly criticize the South African government on South African media. But the reverse would be unthinkable in Rwanda. It's a chilling thought. Imagine living in a place where expressing a different opinion could land you in trouble. It makes you wonder how many voices are being silenced, how many stories aren't being told because of fear.
Yeah, General Nyamwasa's willingness to speak out, despite the risks, is a testament to the importance of giving a platform to those who might otherwise be unheard.
It also highlights the responsibility platforms like the Unseen Wisdom have to keep asking tough questions, to dig deeper, and to challenge the status quo, especially when it comes to information that might be deliberately hidden.
You mentioned the SANDF facing criticism for their involvement. It seems they're getting it from both sides. Those who support intervention and those who oppose it. It's like they can't win.
Right, it's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
South Africa has to consider its own interests, regional stability, and its responsibility to protect its citizens, including those Rwandan refugees who've sought safety here.
And let's not forget the diplomatic fallout. The Rwandan government's response to President Ramaphosa's statement was anything but diplomatic, according to General Nyamwasa. It's like they've thrown down the gauntlet.
Relations between the two countries are undoubtedly strained. But here's the thing. If South Africa hadn't intervened, if this tension hadn't boiled over, would we even be having this conversation? Would General Nyamwasa's revelations have come to light?
It's a question with no easy answer. It's almost like a paradox. South Africa's intervention, which was intended to help stabilize the situation, may have actually exposed an even deeper level of complexity and tension.
And potentially revealed truths that some might prefer to remain hidden. It's a classic case of unintended consequences.
So where do we go from here? What happens now?
That's the million-rand question, isn't it? General Nyamwasa urges the international community, particularly the UN Security Council, to take a stronger stance against what he sees as Rwandan aggression. But he's not naive about the challenges.
Right, he points out that several powerful nations within the Security Council could easily pressure Rwanda to withdraw its troops from the DRC. But they haven't done so. It makes you wonder, are those nations prioritizing their own strategic interests over the well-being of the Congolese people?
It's a tough but necessary question to ask, and it brings us back to the role of South Africa. General Nyamwasa seems cautiously optimistic about their involvement, but he's not without concerns.
He worries that South Africa may have underestimated the complexities of this conflict and the potential for escalation. He even suggested that the SANDF might not be fully equipped for a confrontation with a sovereign nation like Rwanda, which is a chilling thought.
It's a high-stakes game, and it seems like the players are only just beginning to understand the rules.
And the potential consequences of making the wrong move. It feels like we're at a crossroads, a tipping point, where the choices made in the coming weeks and months could have a profound impact on the region for years to come.
We can't predict the future, but we can learn from the past. And General Nyamwasa's insights offer a valuable roadmap, even if it's one full of twists and turns.
His willingness to speak out, to challenge the official narrative, to expose potential truths that might have otherwise remained buried, is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of situations, even when the stakes are incredibly high, there's always a glimmer of hope.
It's a reminder that truth matters, transparency matters, accountability matters, and that even the most entrenched systems of power can be challenged.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the wider impact, doesn't it?
It's alarming to think about how this conflict is impacting the entire region.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect that goes far beyond Rwanda and the DRC. Think about the millions of refugees who fled to neighboring countries, the strain on resources, the potential for instability to spread. It's a recipe for disaster.
And the human cost is immeasurable. The trauma, the displacement, the shattered lives. It's a tragedy that's been unfolding for decades. General Nyamwasa is spot on when he says we can't just keep putting out fires. We need to address the root causes of this conflict, the underlying issues that keep fanning the flames.
Easier said than done, right? Where do we even begin to untangle such a complex web of historical grievances, political power struggles, and resource conflicts?
Well, General Nyamwasa suggests starting with dialogue, real meaningful dialogue. He emphasizes the need for all parties involved to come to the table, to genuinely listen to each other's grievances, to find some common ground, however difficult that might seem.
But can we realistically expect that to happen when there's so much mistrust, resentment, and pain on all sides? It feels like expecting a miracle.
It won't be easy, that's for sure. But it's the only way to break this cycle of violence and create a path towards lasting peace. It's the only way to move forward.
General Nyamwasa's own story offers a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. He was once a close ally of President Kagame, but he chose to break with the regime when he could no longer condone its actions. That took immense courage.
Absolutely. His willingness to speak out, to challenge the status quo, even at great personal risk, shows that change is possible, even within seemingly impenetrable systems of power.
It's a powerful message of hope, but it's also a stark warning. General Nyamwasa's life is in danger, precisely because he dared to speak truth to power. It underscores the risks faced by those who challenge authoritarian regimes.
Yeah, it's a sobering reminder that the fight for justice and human rights often comes at a great personal cost. But it's a fight worth having, because ultimately silence only benefits the oppressors.
So we're left with a lot to ponder. South Africa's intervention, while well-intentioned, seems to have stirred up a hornet's nest, revealing layers of complexity and hidden truths that might have otherwise remained obscured. And now the world is watching.
General Nyamwasa's insights have provided a valuable, albeit unsettling, glimpse behind the curtain. He's challenged us to question the narratives we've been told, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to recognize the human cost of this seemingly intractable conflict.
He's issued a call to action for the international community to step up, to hold those in power accountable, and to work towards a just and lasting peace. It remains to be seen if anyone is listening.
But one thing's for sure, South Africa's intervention has brought the situation in the DRC to the forefront of global attention. The world can no longer pretend to be unaware of the suffering, the injustice, the complex web of interests that fuel this conflict. The question now is, what will we do with this newfound awareness?
It's a question each of us needs to grapple with. General Nyamwasa's story is a testament to the power of a single voice, to challenge the status quo. Imagine what we could achieve if we all raised our voices together, demanding justice, demanding accountability, demanding peace. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of the DRC conflict. We hope you'll continue to seek out the unseen wisdom, to challenge the narratives you're given, and to use your voice to make a difference in the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay informed.